Mr. West, you may inquire.
Thank you.
Afternoon.
Hi.
My name is Don West. I'm co-counsel with Mr. O'Meara on behalf of Mr. Zimmerman. How long have you lived here in Seminole County?
Since 1981?
Just as a child then, I guess.
Yes.
Do you usually read the local newspapers and watch the local television stations?
I watch the local TV.
Do you subscribe or have an opportunity to read the Orlando Sentinel on occasion?
I do subscribe to it, but it's mainly for coupons. So if I want to read something, I go online.
Would you access the Orlando Sentinel newspaper online, for example?
No, just like the highlights that are on Yahoo. I might read those once in a while.
So if you're looking for headline type information, headline type news, what's your source for that?
Usually TV. You mean on the internet?
Well, let's say you woke up and you said, what's going on in the world today?
TV.
And that would usually be a local news station?
Yes.
Do you ever turn to the cable networks, CNN, HLN?
No, we don't have cable. We use antenna only.
The old school?
Well, it's a big one up in the attic, but yeah.
But you only get the local stations that are broadcast through the old style antenna?
That's correct.
So you don't have access to any cable stations at all?
No.
So locally you would have the three major networks, or is there four maybe?
2, 6, 9, 35, 65,
Mm-hmm.
27.
So your access to local news by television is pretty much limited to that?
Yes.
Okay. So to the extent that you followed the actual proceedings in the case, would it have been on one of those stations?
Yes.
Do you think that you actually watched some of the hearings before, or just heard about them?
I watched some of it.
The hearings that you may have watched were the ones that you've talked about?
Yes.
The one that mentioned the money, that would have been something that you watched in person as it was happening?
Yes.
Do you think you've watched any hearings since then?
No.
Had the news about this case caught your attention before that hearing?
Yes.
Were you aware from the news when George Zimmerman was arrested?
Yes.
And had you followed the news even before that?
You mean regarding other issues?
No, regarding this case, that you were aware of this case and that that the case was in the news before Mr. Zimmerman was arrested?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned that you've seen Mr. O'Meara or heard him on television.
Yes.
Have you heard any spokespersons or attorneys for Trayvon Martin's family on television?
I've seen Trayvon Martin's family. I don't recall hearing their attorney.
By family, you mean Mr. Tracy Martin and Ms. Sabrina Fulton?
I think his parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you may have heard or watched a press conference where they spoke personally?
Yes.
Do you have any memory of hearing also one or more of the attorneys connected with the family?
No.
Do you recognize anyone here in the courtroom that you may have seen on television?
I'm not sure, but I think, is that his mom? No? Then no,
Yes,
I don't
ma'am.
remember. I'm not sure.
Could you estimate how many times you may have heard or read or talked about the case or some aspect of it since you first had it brought to your attention until now?
Well, are you counting times where they just announce like a brief 5-second something and that's it? Like, you know how sometimes they'll give you little tidbits and bits of something and...
Something like hearing today on Zimmerman.
Something like that. Well, if you include all of those, it could be 30 or more. But actually, there's only one trial that I saw regarding the money. And as far as the news media, I would say less than 10 times. Actually listening to it for more than a few minutes, not just a 5-second flash.
Where you actually watched a story about the case?
Yeah.
Was there anything in those stories that you now remember that kind of stuck with you? Any issues, any evidence in particular?
The main thing I remember is when it first happened, the media talked about the altercation and the young man was shot and that Zimmerman was injured.
Right.
That was the main thing that I remember.
Did you ever see photographs on television or in any newspaper you came across of Mr. Zimmerman's injuries?
There was a video of him during one of the news conferences that showed the injury.
And what was your reaction when you saw those photos?
I thought it's possible they were, in a fight before the gun went off.
Have you were you aware of some of the public events associated with the case?
As far as...
Oh, demonstrations and protests and such.
Yeah.
Generally watched or knew about that on television?
Yes.
Did that have any effect or impact on you and how you were viewing the case?
No.
Were you ever asked to, or did you consider signing a petition in connection with the case?
No.
Or donate money?
No.
I may not have heard your answer if you gave it, so I would ask you specifically if, when you and your husband have talked about the case, if he's expressed his opinion to you.
No.
And have you expressed your opinion to him?
He may have overheard me discussing it with my son or my daughter, but not directly with him.
Yeah, I have just one minute. Thank you, ma'am. Only following up briefly from the comment that you talked about the case a little bit with your husband, but you'd also talked about it some with your children.
Mm-hmm.
Have your children expressed opinions concerning this case to you, how they feel about it?
Yes.
Have they reached an opinion as to guilt or innocence?
No.
Or as to the importance of particular pieces of evidence or that kind of thing?
No.
has it been more of a general discussion of the case rather than staking a position one way or another?
We're all kind of on the same page. We listen to everything, but we don't believe what we hear on TV. We like to base our final judgment on the whole story, you know, all the evidence. So that's kind of what they share with me is, they'll say something like, well, you know, what if that was your family member? And we discuss how things should be fair and how either side, you have to hear everything before you can base an opinion. And that's pretty much how my kids voice their opinion or
So,
discuss that case.
even though you've been exposed through the media to lots of things
Yes.
about the case, you feel confident and comfortable with the idea that should you sit on the jury, your decision would be based on the evidence that comes in the courtroom.
Yes.
And if there might be other things you've heard, whether true or not, that would be relatively easy for you to sort out and make your decision just on what you hear right here.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. When counsel's ready, please approach.